Thank you, Alwin, for being patient. Hello. I know that you've called in before, but this is a hand from Spain or something?
Yes, this is from Casino Barcelona in Barcelona, Spain. I was there for vacation and just decided to check it out.
Okay, so Barcelona. And of course, the scouting report on these public games in Europe are that they are very, very miserable and they are highly raked, which is why you see the Euros come over to the US.
Yeah, interestingly enough, there were a decent amount of people who were not speaking English, which makes sense, which made it a little difficult for me to kind of understand what was going on. Fortunately, the villain in this hand is actually somebody from England, so him and I were actually chatting quite a bit. So I guess still a Euro pro, but at least one that was speaking my language.
And what's the size of the game here?
So I converted it into dollars. It's about a 510 game. So we'll stick with 510 for the purposes of this call.
You converted it from euros to dollars?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not that hard of a conversion. What was it in euros?
I think it was about 510 as well. So
Right, it was
actually,
5-10 euros, right? I mean, you're
sure,
not you're not you're not playing RMB, you know.
you caught me.
All right. So 5-10 euros. Okay, 5-10 euros. Yeah.
I will note though, I did not bring local cash, so I had to convert it there, and that did take quite a bit. So
How did you convert it? I'm just curious.
you can bring in your US dollars, and then at the counter they can exchange it for euros. But I forget the exact rate that they take, but it's quite high.
Yeah, they take a vig. The reason why I ask about that is because I played in Cyprus one time, in Turkish Cyprus on the north side of the island at the Merit WPT Merit, and they did the same type of thing. But you never see that in the U.S. Like, there's no casinos that will change foreign currency. Like you can't come and like play euros and they're going to give you dollars, but you do see it the other way around. I don't know how common it is, but everybody wants to, or they'll just playing in dollars too, right?
Right, right.
So how deep are you guys?
I will be the effective stack in this hand with about 2,500. So 2,520, I think, is what I have exactly.
Okay, 25-20. Okay,
So we start off, I'm in hijack with ace of clubs, king of diamonds.
ace of clubs, king of diamonds, and the hijack.
Correct.
Okay,
I opened to $30 or 30 euros. The cutoff was next to act. Immediately three bets to 100. Folds back around to me.
is this the British guy?
Yeah, he's from Britain. He actually lives in Vegas and plays in Vegas most of the time, but just so happened to be also in Barcelona for who knows what.
So 30 to 100 folds back around to you. Okay.
I go ahead and four bet, given how deep we are. I four bet to 370.
Okay.
He thinks for a little bit and then calls.
Hero four bets to 370. So you're playing off of, I don't have a euros key, so I'm using dollars on the live stream, but you're playing off of 25-25, so it's straight 5-10. So you're 250 big blinds deep, right? Opening to 30, three bet to 100. Just out of curiosity, thing to are you if he puts in a five bet, are you just going with it? Was that what the dynamic was here with Ace King offsuit?
So I'd been chatting with him a little bit before, and he usually plays pretty big games. I know he said when he was in Vegas, he usually plays 10-20 and 20-40. He was encouraging the entire table to straddle more. He voluntarily straddled on his own and a double straddle a few times and even triple straddled once or twice. I think he was just kind of, this felt like lower stakes for him. So I think I may have been forced to bring it to go all in, but depending on the sizing. Otherwise, I think I might fold. Depending, like if he prices me in too much, I think if there's playability post flop is basically what I'm saying.
So I have two thoughts on this. One that go in either direction. The first thought that I have is if I'm playing against a guy like that, that your sort of description that might say like play larger, blah blah blah, I might do just a lot of just calling here to almost like disguise the strength of my hand and call down, on a lot of runouts, even sometimes all the way down with like, non-pairs. Obviously it depends on the runout. You're sort of disguising your hand, shaping the hand where you're going to have a strong hand, especially if you hit top pair to call all the way down. He probably will barrel off, put a ton of pressure on you, and should effectively try to value bet something that's worse because your hand is slightly under rep. That's number one for the case for calling. The case for four betting, though, is that it's a lot of times you'll see these guys call way too wide. Like if you take the sizing that you have done here, then your four bet is just pure value, right? Like, I mean, he's obviously should be structuring correctly to the three bet, but sometimes even, some of these guys have egos and stuff. And, are they really folding off what they're supposed to fold off versus calling what they're supposed to call? And it could just be, I'm losing too much value here. He's going to three bet call with like 100% of hands. If he's going to three bet call with 100% of his hands that he's three betting with, then sure, it should be a four bet with ace king. But I do sometimes take that somewhat passive line because, there's nobody in between, right? I mean, it's not an automatic four bet anyways, hijack versus cutoff, but there's no overlay per se. It's midish to late, I would say. It's not like button versus small blind, and it's not under the gun versus like under the gun plus one, which are the two extremes. So I assume he calls.
He does.
Okay, so calls.
He thinks for maybe like a couple seconds and then goes ahead and calls.
Okay.
So the pot is about 740.
Okay, on to the flop here.
The flop comes ace of spades, jack of diamonds, five of diamonds.
Ace of spades, jack of diamonds, five of diamonds. So you flop. This is exactly what I'm talking about, right? He might think that you just never have ace king here. And, he might barrel you off, but you're going to obviously hold on here quite a bit.
Yeah. So with pretty much all of my four bet range, I decide to bet small, and I bet about a third pot, so 250.
So hero bet. I can't get the euro. Oh, there we go. I got the euro sign up. All right. So hero bet's 250. Yep.
And he goes ahead and calls. So I guess that's actually my first question is in terms of flop sizing. I'm thinking with this flop, I'm either way ahead or way behind.
I mean,
maybe he's trapping with aces, but otherwise it's I'm either way ahead or way behind, and I think that's kind of where.
Yeah, I mean it's a four bet pot, right? So it seems pretty. There's a lot of automatic stuff in four bet pots on the flop a lot too. Where you're supposed to be almost always c betting, and you can pretty much always c bet for this type of sizing, like almost your entire range. And to start to split that off in four bet pots starts to get a little bit complex. I mean, could you have hands that went 250 versus hands that went like 500? I mean, when he calls here, the pot's going to be 1250, right? 1250. You guys are going to have about 19-ish left. You can still get the money in. I guess my question to you is that when you start with this small bet, are you ever considering checking a blank, almost like a trap, like an offsuit 7 or something like that, to try to let him? Here's my thought. Like, if you take this small sizing, again, I don't necessarily know what he thinks of you, but it's like, yeah, like if you're capable, maybe he hero calls you down with an ace, you could maybe get four bet pot and get three streets and get called by like ace queen or ace 10. But once you, going back sort of the last call too, when you start with a small sizing here, which is kind of a routine, if you get a blank on the turn, you could check, and he probably needs to start bluffing any of those sort of gut shot types of holdings. Now, the thing is that if he just checks it back, you have to make up for it on the river by like blasting away. I'm just kind of thinking out loud. I don't know if your plan was just to go bet or what.
Depending on the turn.
On a blank. On a blank, you're going to check the turn, like say like the 7 of clubs.
Yeah, I think depending on that turn, since especially because I'm out of position, I think, like I said, I'm either way ahead or way behind. I mean, I don't want to fold out too many hands that it beat. For example, if he has kings or queens or even pocket tens that decide to float, I don't want to fold too many of those out.
I don't know if I agree with you that you're way ahead, way behind. All you've done is four bet, and then you've taken a 1/3 sizing on the flop. That doesn't put you in a way ahead, way behind spot. If you were way ahead, if you were said, oh, I bet the flop and he called, now I'm way ahead, way behind, then you've done something wrong. But that's not the case here. You just went 1/3 on the flop. Before bet ace king, you went 1/3 on the flop. He called. You're not way ahead, way behind on a block 7. You know what I'm saying? So I think you're under repping yourself a little bit. Anyways, yeah, 12. So it's 1250 here. 1250 euros here to the turn. Okay.
The turn does not come a blank. It comes a queen of clubs.
Okay. Well, that's not a blank.
So my thinking on this is a lot of his four bet calling range is pretty much represented here, whether it's queens, jacks, and so on and so forth. And felt like I was in a spot where I was probably again like in this middle area. So I decided to check here.
Okay. I just wonder, what are you betting here on the turn?
You mean like what cards would I bet, or how much?
No, what on this card? What are you betting? So if you can, so same thing. Four bet pot, right? You bet one third. He calls. Turns a queen. Instead of checking, you bet. I'm saying, what are you betting here? What hands are you betting here?
I'd probably bet sets, aces, queens, jacks,
And then check everything else and bet king 10, I assume.
yeah, and king 10, right?
Yeah. I mean, and the other thing too is that this card gives the guy a lot of showdown value where, like, if you ever wanted to try to get, I wouldn't want to get tricky if I had super thick value, especially even unblocking like everything, like with king 10. I don't know if I would get tricky with it and try to go for a check raise because this might get checked through quite a bit. I don't know if he bets off queen jack here on the turn. Yeah, maybe. I'm just kind of, like I said, I'm kind of thinking out loud here. I don't think it, there's definitely, I don't think anyone's going to get on you for checking ace king here. So you check, okay.
Yeah, I think at this point, pretty much most aces that call for bet are beating me. Sure, there might be a few like random ace four, ace three, ace deuce, random ones, but like the main ones, ace queen, ace jack, are now beating me. So I check. He goes ahead and checks back after thinking for maybe a few seconds.
Checks behind. Okay. By the way, you probably wouldn't have king 10 because it's a four bet pot, but who knows, like once in a while. I mean, I guess you might have some ace X, but I mean, again, that's kind of weird too. Like even if you had ace X of diamonds, or you really continue. I mean, that's why it's kind of a weird thing to be here on the turn. And then, I mean, you could have jack, jack, but are you four betting jack, jack? Are you four betting queen, queen? You might be four betting ace, ace, sure. But you check and hero checks behind, and it remains 1250 euros.
The river comes yet another non-blank. It comes the king of spades.
Oh,
And I decide to check. He thinks for a few seconds and then he jams, covering me. So for 1900.
so the opponent here, so cutoff jams 1900.
Yes, that's how much I had left.
So it's about pot and a half, right?
Yep.
It's about pot and a half. So again, you're going to be getting less than 2-1. You can go down the MDF streets too, where we can say, well, he's betting pot and a half, which, if he's betting two times the pot, he needs to win 66% of the time. Pot and a half is 60% of the time. You need to defend with 40% of hands if you went from MDF spot. Here's the thing, like, because you don't have 10x here, and I think the river probably is reflected almost always with a check given normal ranges at the end, then his bet sizing probably should be polar with a 10x and with a bluff, right? Giving you a worse price. And again, I'll go back to what I said too before here. Your flop sizing is pretty small, but one of the things though that I would say that, again, people don't necessarily harness the concept is that the queen is not a blank. It's different from another caller that we had earlier on today, where the 3 was a blank and it went check, check. The queen's not a blank. And you can definitely have like some ace king. You might even have ace jack here. You could even check ace queen here some of the time too. So the fact that you check from up front on the turn does not mean that you have nothing. That would be indicative to me where hands that had a little bit of like a draw wouldn't just like blindly bet all the time. It's not like ace jack 5, you bet one third, the guy calls with king 10 suited or queen 10 suited or whatever on the flop, and now the turn is like a brick 7 and you check, and now he should be betting king 10 and queen 10 on a brick 7 when you check a lot. But here, because you're going to be checking so much, it means he doesn't bet that much on the turn. Nowhere near as much as if it was a brick. He can have some of those pair plus or a 10x type of diamond type of holding, something like that. Now, is 10-10 called on the flop to one third? 10-10 with a diamond on ace jack 5 in a 4-bet pot? Pretty close, but what if he had like just absolutely naked like a naked suited connector, like 7-8 of diamonds. Does that hand, what the point that I'm trying to make here is that it's pretty obvious that if you had a hand like 7-8 of diamonds on ace jack 5, and then the turn was like, an offsuit 9, an offsuit 6, some real brick, an offsuit 4, and you check, he's supposed to bet. When the turn is a queen, maybe he is supposed to bet a lot, but the point that I'm trying to make here though is that you're not always like check folding on the turn. You might have a lot of check calls on the turn because of the texture. So it makes him bet those hands less often, I would say. I mean, there's that. So maybe, because you would think, maybe, 7-8 of diamonds might. I mean, I would still probably lean towards a fold here, I would say. But yeah, it's, if you think he's capable, it's pretty dicey. I haven't even looked at the comments. People saying, I mean, he's a Euro. What tens does he have? 10-9 of diamonds. Well, what about Jack 10? What about Queen? The point that I'm trying to make is like Jack 10 suited, Queen 10 suited, things like that. Obviously, he's never doing anything worse for value, but yeah, it's probably closer than we think.
The way I was thinking is like it's relatively hard for him to have a 10, but it's also hard for him to have a bluff. I almost want to say the only hands I would go this polar that are for value are sets, and maybe not even sets, and tens. The way I think should have thought about this in the moment is that the value range, I'm not necessarily beating much of the value range.
Well, how does I mean? What else is it? What value range is here besides 10x?
That's kind of what I'm thinking is like most of the value range,
King king,
queens, jacks might not even bet here.
queens and jacks are going to bet the turn. You know, and they're not going to. Queens and jacks aren't going to check back the turn and then jam on this river. I mean, maybe kings. Is it? But you lose to kings, and you block it, and you block kings, right?
Yeah,
So, I mean, it's probably a 10 or nothing here. It's probably a 10 or nothing.
yeah.
Yanni Karin saying, how is this not a snap call? How is this? I still think he has queens. How can he have queens the way that he played this hand? Ace, queen, ace, jack. Come on. Why ace, queen, ace, jack? What, to get the guy off of ace, king? Come on, guys. I mean, I think you just kind of boil this down and try to figure out like how many tens does he possibly have here. You bet 1/3, so all of the Broadway hands are in there.
Like gutters, like king
Yeah, I mean,
10.
all of the Broadway hands are in there. You did size 4-bet pretty large, so I mean, what bluffs here? So I guess he's probably supposed to turn some of the worst two pairs into bluffs, like Queen Jack, something like that.
Yeah, I think some other bluffs are potential miss flush draws.
Queen Jack and King Queen maybe get turned into bluffs here, I think would make sense here. And then again, like I said, the question is that how often does he just have a low suited connector? And is that bet on the turn with just approaching absolutely no showdown value? If the low suited connector is bet a lot on the turn, approaching no showdown value, and then he checks behind and he jams here, then he doesn't have that much of that. Although I went back to what I said before, though, it's not, the queen isn't just like an automatic give up for you. You check calling a lot. What did you end up doing?
I ended up tanking for a little bit, and then someone at the table called clock within like a minute, which did not give me much time. And then I side called. Do you want the reveal?
Please.
He had Jack 10 of hearts.
Jack 10. I mean, that's one of the hands, right? That makes sense.
Theoretically, he could have missed diamond draws with the ace of diamonds. The only problem is I hold the king of diamonds, so I block potential bluffs there, like king 10 of diamonds, that could have been floating on a flop. So that was, I'm not sure if that makes a huge difference, but that was something that I thought about.
Yeah, I mean, I get. So it's just interesting of what is supposed to turn into a bluff here at the end for him. Because if I'm saying king, queen, and queen, jack, maybe ace, whatever ace X little that he defends to as a 4-bet, maybe sometimes gets turned into a bluff. And we could be at this all day long. This is where sometimes it's fun to go to the computer and take a look. It's just
Yeah,
not
I,
a, it's
I
not a
ended up
common spot to be in, you know.
yeah, I ended up chatting with him afterwards as I was racking up, and I said, I mean, it was a good bet. You got me to call, but I asked him like, what hands would you have taken a similar sizing with? And he said, I'm not betting anything other than a 10
Right.
or pocket aces.
Pocket aces.
And he said, very occasionally I may bet some bluffs like 8-7 of diamonds.
Mm-hmm. The question is how often are those midish, I keep going back to how often are those midish suited connectors checked back on the turn or bet? That's an interesting exercise. Again, usually you start a bluff, right, with 7-8 of diamonds that has no showdown value, but when a card comes in on the turn that's reflected a lot from you as the hero checking the turn, it means that you're probably supposed to bluff less often, as opposed to if the turn was like an offsuit 4 and you check, then it obviously starts to bluff. But Alwin, thank you very much